Just turn the key on first. Nice, I got 5 volts on both signals. That's a good thing. Go ahead, crank it. Okay, we won, yes. That is all I need right there. This thing's gonna run when I put it back together. Well, quick intro here. I did sell the RV to a really great family, and we were on our test drive. Well, I didn't sell it yet. There was no exchange of money, but we were on a test drive. Check engine light came on our test drive. And a little backstory behind that, we did about 1,500 miles or so this summer. Took a trip to Arkansas and back, no problem. It sat for maybe a month since I last used it. I came out to start it after I cleaned it, you know, getting it ready to sell, and it wouldn't start. Checked the inlet of the transfer pump for algae. There was algae there again, but it wasn't blocked all the way like previously. Some of you that follow me on Facebook would remember my algae in the transfer pump that was causing a low power condition, surging, no start. Anyway, moving on. I did have some algae again, but it wasn't blocked the whole time. So I saw that and I'm like, bingo, that's it. And I cleaned that out, changed the fuel filter, inspected the tank, everything looked good. No algae in the tank. For whatever reason, it grows in that location. And I learned through my fuel system test that someone has bypassed one of the fuel filters, which is a filter before the transfer pump. It's been bypassed. It's not there, it doesn't exist. So that prevents probably those kinds of problems. Anyway, side note there. So I cleaned that out, changed the fuel filter, and it didn't start right a few times. And of course, I'm thinking airbound, and then it fired right up. It was fine. And I kept trying it for like 4 or 5 days as I'm cleaning it, getting it ready, you know, starting it up, letting it get warm. Never drove it, but was playing around with it, and I felt pretty confident. And we had this couple, this nice couple that I mentioned, come look at it. And I was actually excited about them looking at it because I wanted to drive it too. It's hard to get in and out of my driveway, and you don't just quickly test drive a 40-foot bus. So I even told them about the situation, what I was dealing with, and I'm like, I'm glad you're here because you're interested. Let's go for a ride. Let's see how it does. It drove flawlessly for 80% of the trip. We just took them on the highway a couple miles and came back, and on the highway, the check engine light came on. Didn't feel any running problems at all, but the check engine light came on. We switched driver positions because I was letting Tim drive, the potential new owner. When I was driving it, you know, the light was on. I didn't want to turn it off, and I felt or heard like an engine lugging type condition just for a brief few seconds, but it was fine. It drove fine all the way home with the check engine light on. Pull in the driveway and shut it off, let it sit. I think I went to start it immediately while Tim was here. I don't remember, and it seemed to not want to start right away. And then the next morning I checked it. I sent them home. The next morning I checked it. It's a no start again, and I have to kind of give it gas a little bit and to make it run and catch, and so that is the lead into all of these fuel pressure measurements and testing that I'm about to do in this video. And I did have a crank sensor fault, an engine speed sensor fault, but these Cummins are known for setting false engine speed sensor codes when you have a fuel system problem. I experienced that in my last saga 2 years ago, that I had a false engine speed sensor code when I had algae in that transfer pump. So we're attacking the fuel system first. So I'll try to piece this together for you as I filmed it. And I wasn't intending to make a video out of this. So this is kind of 3/4 of the way into this diagnosis. And I just think that this will help other CAPS system owners out there in the future. And it will help the new owner here with this rig. So that's the intent here. Fuel system testing is next. We suspect a fuel system problem. Let's have at it. Okay, so you guys are just looking at some footage that we did right here where we have my friend's Cummins Insight connected, and we're looking at accumulator pressure set point, which is the command compared to accumulator pressure. And you can see that these numbers are real close to each other, the desired and actual. And the baud rate or the refresh is really slow on this, but you can see here at one point in time, I'm cranking it over and my accumulator pressure is matching exactly what the set point is. And so we're pretty confident about the pump here. So Tim, watch my accumulator pressure, which is my high pressure side, and I'm gonna shut this off. Watch this bleed down. And actually you got that?
Yeah, I got it.
Our desired set point's 54, so we're matched there. If I rev it, give it some throttle, that should rise. I mean, I'm not sure, maybe not.
We got a little delay.
And not being under load. Okay, yeah, it's delayed.
It's
so you see the actual
7,000 now.
Yeah, the actual and desired are, accumulator pressure set point and the actual accumulator pressure are matching. But watch this. Watch when we shut it off. And I believe that this is my friend Brian here, and I believe this is where our problem is. And watch how fast this guy bleeds down.
Real fast.
We have a bleed down issue.
That shouldn't be doing that.
Should not be doing that. I agree with you.
That should stay and bleed down over time.
Yep.
Not like that.
Not like that.
No.
Now we are mentioning here a bleed down issue, and we're both concerned about it. We didn't want to see pressures drop off that quickly, but it turns out that is normal on this system. So the major bleed down issue was not a concern, but it led us to look a little further. And by the way, we also had that, I believe it's a 456 code, which had to do with fuel pressure previously. That was there again when we started, along with engine speed sensor code. So that's what put us here. We're focusing on the fuel system. Some of the other checks involved was to look for air in the fuel system. I'm not doing this by the book because I didn't have the right setup using that CompuCheck fitting that we had talked about in the last video, the one that I didn't measure properly because I didn't have the connection for it. They want you to connect there and use some type of bleed and look for bubbles in the system. So I chose to do it this way with a clear line, just looking for bubbles in the system. And we didn't find any. We also did some further checks of pinching off the pressure line to look for other leaks, and that led us nowhere to. And so this wasn't a fuel system issue. I'm pretty convinced at this point this is not a fuel system problem. And what I had done, the final test, is I pinched the supply line to the transfer pump, and we watched the vacuum build in the system, and then the engine stalled. And during that process, it did look like we had some air, but how's it gonna hold vacuum in that amount of time after a stall? And I just moved away from the air, or at least I'm thinking I'm moving away from the air and fuel system problem. So I also want to point out before I forget that I had at one point when my friend Brian was here with his Insight, his Cummins Insight, when I cranked it over and it wasn't starting, or it was chugging and almost starting, I had like 6,000 pounds of pressure in the accumulator pressure, on the accumulator pressure sensor, the high pressure side of the system. So that told us maybe it wasn't fuel. But the key is this: when I had it stall on me with the pinched supply line, it set 3 additional fault codes in addition to the engine speed sensor code. And I bought this cheap little thing off of Amazon that reads codes and some data, and what they advertise it as is critical data. And I was like, sweet, I hope I can read exhaust temperature and my fuel, high pressure fuel, or on this it's called your accumulator pressure, or the high side of the fuel system. I was hoping I could see that data parameter because I'm chasing a fuel problem, and then also read trouble code. So I bought this tool. It was like $180 or $190, and yeah, it doesn't give me that data. It gives me transmission fluid temperature, it gives me oil pressure, it gives me intake air temperature, and some other really gauge indicators. That's nice, not really, I already have those, but it does allow me to read and clear trouble codes, which to me, owning this rig and handing this off to someone else, I think to have the ability to read fault codes was worth the $190 purchase. The other thing is, remember my oil pressure gauge sticks from whenever it was spiked in the mines, and now we can read oil pressure from the engine computer, and those are 2 different sensors. So I like that. The gauge transmission fluid, the gauge oil pressure, those are separate sensors. Now I can read actual temperature of the transmission fluid and engine temperature and water temperature, all of those, off of the engine computer. And I realize I have those on the gauge, but again, gauges are separate. So anyway, a little rant on the tool I bought, but that tool helped me here today because when I pinched the supply line and looked for the vacuum and the engine stalled, of course I'm setting fuel related fault codes. And so while the engine's running, I'm just playing around with the tool, and I apologize, you guys did not see this part, but I cleared the codes. I didn't know that I could clear them with the engine running because I continued, the whole time I've been troubleshooting, I've had this engine speed sensor fault. But again, I'm attributing that to the long crank times and the fuel issue because I've seen it before. And I tried clearing the codes with the engine running and they won't clear. At least that was my assumption. Now with these 3 additional codes, so a total of 4 now, I clear the fault codes with the engine running and it does clear. It does clear with the engine running. And I have a hard fault. That engine speed sensor code is there with the engine running and with the engine running well. And so guess what? I should have paid attention to the count that was 0 telling me it's a current fault with the engine running. Check engine lights on solid. I could show you that part. We could do that before I scope test it. But that's where we are. I'm going to scope test these crank sensors right now. And I did this before 2 years ago. You guys haven't seen it. Again, I scope tested both engine speed sensors. They're staggered. They're right next to each other. They're only a few degrees apart from each other. I had to hook one because I couldn't get to it, and I back probed the other. And when I was done with the hook, I did use liquid tape. I'm hoping maybe I got some corrosion and I'll have to change those sensors because it's gonna take me 5-10 hours to change those sensors. I have to either remove the high pressure pump or I have to remove the air compressor / hydraulic pump to get to it. I hope it's a wiring problem. We're gonna get the Pico on this in a second. Let me take you up front and show you the reading and clearing of fault codes. There's my long crank time. You see the fault count of 0. That 190 FM2 ID 190, that is an engine speed sensor code. The count of 0. Check engine light is on. What's the 0 count telling me? That's a hard fault. It's happening all the time. I really feel like I never even had to do any of the fuel tests. And the reason I went that direction, man, when I saw that code, immediately I'm thinking fuel. Immediately, because I also had that 456 code, which is a fuel pressure code. I had that code again too when I first looked at this one. My friend Brian came over, but I don't remember how many counts and how many drive cycles. I should have paid attention to that. But I've seen false engine speed sensor, or I call it crank sensor, engine speed sensor codes. I've seen false ones on this, but the fact that the engine's running, that's a hard fault with the light on. You guys might be thinking, well, you know, how's the engine running? How do you have even a tachometer signal with a faulty engine speed sensor? And the answer is there are 2 of them. There's 2 of them, and they're side by side, and this engine can run with one. So we're about to find out. I like this little tool. Well, let me show you, while we're here, let me show you a couple more things here. Yeah, see, rough start every time. Light comes on. So gauge, yeah, I like that. Those are the ones I kind of pulled up that felt like those would be the ones I'd want to watch. Maybe not RPM. Like, it's got like horsepower and all this other calculated stuff. I don't give a crap about that. But my transmission fluid temperature of 98, my water temperature of 141, and my oil pressure of 40. That's pretty cool, especially when you have a gauge that's doing this and sticking. Man, I can't even unstick it anymore. Right? Sticking oil pressure gauge. I hate to sell my friend, well, my new friend Tim, the new owner, a rig with a sticking oil pressure gauge, but I don't even know where I'm gonna get these gauges from. But that gauge, again, is separate from that one. That's the one the engine computer's looking at, and that's the one that we're looking at. Nice thing too, transmission fluid temperature, you know, reads the bottom number there is 140. And hard to read that, you know, when it's that low. I've never seen past 210. The only time I saw it up that high was when we were in Arizona on a 110-degree day pulling a mountain. But I like that I'm now looking at not only the temperatures up here, which are separate, but I'm looking at them here. And I don't know that I'd look at RPM, but we can change that one. We can go, those would probably be the 4 that I'd look at driving it. And then the fact that I can get codes, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that. And I can clear them too. And I missed this part, but these were the 4 codes I had whenever we did our pinch the fuel line test. I cleared them all and only the engine speed sensor code came back. All right, enough of that. Let's go troubleshoot this engine speed sensor fault. So check out this ECM connector. The one to the right is the manufacturer's discretion, and those are all black wires, no colors whatsoever. The ones to the left on the ECM connector would be the Cummins mandatory ones. So it should be looking down there, top row. So engine harness connector A, engine harness connector B. Pretty sure that OEM responsibility, that's the B connector that has all the black wires. And connector A, this doesn't give me colors either, does it? Neither of them give me colors. So it should be pin 9 on connector A. You see where 10 is there. 1 over from 10. Oh, and these are Hall effects. You see a 5-volt supply signal and then engine speed return, which is the ground. But pin 9 is going to be 1 and 17 is going to be the other. So 1 through 10. The next row would be 11, which would be right underneath the number 1. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Then the bolt, 16, 17. So 2 over on the second row. And the second from the end on the top row on 9. You see the connector to the left is colored. And the connector to the right is not. The one to the right is connector B, that's the manufacturer's discretion. The one to the left is the Cummins mandatory connections. Okay, turn the key on first. How much time base we doing here? Let's do a longer one because I'm gonna be up front. I see nothing on either one of those. Depends on where the trigger wheel is as far as what we're going to see. All right, we're going to start it up. That's wrong, no signal on either one. We're on the wrong connector. All right, sorry about that, guys. I did not show the hookups to the 2 crank sensors. I was totally wrong on their location. Show you a different picture I took from previously. Let me start a desktop recording again. Got some weird oscillations in this that I'm not really digging so much at the moment. That could be something with my charging system. Turn that off. Yes, it was. So that was my charging system on this. Start it up. This sucks space, but it's not a $5,000 fuel pump, so I guess I'm happy. Not a bad ground. This could be an open. That's an open. Got 5 volts on that, and with any kind of luck, I do a visual inspection, and I got a mouse that chewed that wire, and I can fix it. There's no signal there. I don't know if these are pull up or pull down. I'd have to unplug the sensors to tell you that, and You can't get to them. You literally can't get to them to do that test. This is a huge job. I have to make sure that I'm on the right wire and that there's no opens in between the computer and the sensor. Typically what I see on 5-volt powered sensors, which this one is, it's a 5-volt supply. What I've seen on these in my entire career is that the signal itself will also be a 5-volt pull down. So this is not a, right off the bat, because we have 5 on this circuit, this is not a module issue. Computer sending the 5 to the sensor, and the sensor should be pulling it to ground. Steady 5. I just got to make sure I'm on the right wire. The original picture that we saw when I was starting it, I did not have a good ground on my scope. This is current right now is a good ground. Let me go down there and eyeball, make sure that I'm on the correct wire. This is my old picture when I did this the first time. So that one I have correct up top. And this was the waveform. I don't know how well a video is going to play, but there you go. So that's my original one when I did this 2 years ago. See the waveforms, 0.5s. Okay, I have to make sure I'm on the right wire. And it is 17 and 9. Oh, I might be on the wrong wire on that one. I am on the wrong wire on that. Why am I having such a hard time reading this? This is view shown is looking at harness side of the, looking at harness side. So that'd be unplugged looking at it. So when you plug it in, the back side, that's how I'm looking at it. I am on the wrong wire on that one. I gotta go underneath. I was definitely on the wrong wire on that blue trace. I'm gonna start it. No signal. Go back a couple frames, see where I was cranking that. Blue trace. No signal. That's stuck at 0. Before I embark on a 10-hour job, I gotta quadruple check myself that that is on the correct terminal. And again, I can't do any unplug it circuitry type testing, which is what I want to do. Can't even get to it. Yeah. I had liquid tape on that one too, the one I'm attached to. From the last time, you see pin 9, I back probed, and 17, I used the little Phil's probe and I liquid taped it. So I'm almost positive I'm on the correct wire. Let me just eyeball it one more time. Definitely the correct pin. That is my capture, no signal. This is not a fuel issue. This is a legit faulty engine speed sensor. Okay, so I left off showing you guys that signal. We were fixed at 0 volts. And I don't know if this is a pull up or pull down design. And if it's a pull down design, there's always the potential that the module is not sending the 5-volt to the sensor and it's not a faulty sensor. But I have to get to the sensor and be able to unplug it to do that test. Sure, you can cut the wire and do stuff like that, but I'm not doing that. I need to do some disassembly so I can at least get to the sensors and do that final unplug it test and then see, but I'm not filming that part. I need to get this done, and I'm hoping what I have so far is gonna help others with a CAPS injection system. Also, you know, I'm hoping it's gonna help someone as far as reading codes and, you know, getting a little cheap little scanner that you can have on the road with you. Super important. That price of that part, less than $200 alone, is worth being able to pull fault codes off of this. And I know there's other components out there, guys. I did my homework, I did my research. This is an older 6-pin design, and this is the one I picked, so, you know, whatever. But yeah, so I'll fill you guys in. We're not done. I'm just not filming the repair part as I pull this stuff apart and see if I can try to sneak my hands in there, maybe change these sensors without pulling big components off of the engine. That's what my hope is. So I'll update you in a bit. Newfound respect for you heavy duty diesel guys, man. This is crazy. This is crazy stuff. So one of my concerns with
with this whole thing, with this call, was, you know, how's something like this go bad with it just sitting? And I have the answer. I just finally was able to unplug the crank sensors, engine speed sensors, and there is absolutely corrosion on that right side sensor connector. And that's how it happens. So that makes me feel good to see that. I may have to replace that connector too. We'll see how bad it is, but I'm gonna pull the sensors out next. Speed sensors don't go bad just with the car or RV sitting still. Corrosion though will make that happen.
A new day, got one of the sensors out. Told my daughter to say a prayer for Dad for this second sensor, because if I break it, I'm gonna have to pull the whole timing cover off in the front to get it out. This has not been fun so far, but I'm just grateful that it happened to me before, that's it, Bean, go murder some animals that chew wires for me. But I'm happy it happened to me before I sold it. The last thing I'd want is for this family that's buying this to have had this problem on their first trip. They plan on taking it to Florida. So grateful from that standpoint. This stuff, I don't do product reviews very often, but this is what cleaned that connector. I sprayed it last night. I also sprayed that second engine speed sensor in hopes that it would dissolve some of the corrosion around where it was sitting. This is the real deal, man. This stuff is pretty freaking amazing. I also used some of their other products as well, and definitely gonna buy some more. Now this is definitely something to be grateful for. Yeah, I was about, I don't know, hour and a half this morning working that thing, get it out. If I broke it, timing cover was gonna have to come off. So yeah, what success looks like.
All right, gotta forgive the camera work here, but just doing some voltage measurements for you guys on the sensor circuits. I got the key on right now, and I did these already. It's 5, 0, and 0 on these. There's 5 volts, 0, and 0. And it's the same on the other one, which is a good thing. A 5 on that pin. 0, 0. Making sure I was making contact with that middle one. Okay. So, what kind of circuit is this? You guys that are following along. Yeah, this is a Cummins diesel, older system. So what? Same concepts, fundamentals. What type of Hall effect is it with a 5, 0, and 0? Remember when we were testing this, I said it was most likely a pull down design. This is not a pull down design. This would be a pull up design, meaning the sensor is going to generate the 5 and send it to the ECM, as opposed to the ECM sending 5 down the signal wire and it being pulled to ground by the transistor. The other 5 volts would be the power feed. So the constant 5 is the power feed, then you'd have a ground and 2 pull-up signals. Now, if I had scan data that would show me both engine speed sensor signals, what we could do right now to confirm wiring integrity from the computer to the sensor is we could take a test light and jump it from the 5 volt power or reference to the signal and touch it on and off and make a signal, and then watch the scan data RPM on those sensors update. And we could do that if I had scan data for that, but I do not with this little generic scan tool. I inspected the harness as well as I could for opens and shorts. There is nothing. And, you know, to be honest, the flowchart, when they have you do this, right away they have you unplugging the sensor. And well, to unplug the sensor, you can see I had to unbolt the hydraulic pump and a bracket. And, you know, technically speaking, you're supposed to unbolt the air compressor too. And I did not. I kind of snuck around it and was able to get the job done without doing that. But imagine that type of work to just prove a wiring harness or sensor issue is to remove all these components and then unplug the sensors, and yeah, real difficult on this one for sure. But pull up design circuit. All right, I got the sensors in. I still have the hydraulic pump hanging that bolts to the back of the air compressor. Should be okay to crank this. I don't want to put everything back together. I want to make sure I have a signal. You know, there's no coolant in it or anything like that. Coolant's drained because of those 2 hoses I had to move. But I'm just gonna crank it real quick and make sure I have a square wave. I want to have square waves on both. We're just gonna crank it over before I put this all back together. So we're capturing the moment of truth right here. It's not gonna start. I have no fuel line on. I have it pinched off. Well, this will be a cranking test, so the frequency is gonna be much less. That's okay, I don't care about that. So I pulled up the old Pico file, as you guys are seeing right here, and then all we need to do is just hit run. Love that about the Pico files. It's ready to go. Just waiting for the wife to give me a crank here. Just turn the key on first. Nice, I got 5 volts on both signals. That's a good thing. Go ahead, crank it. Okay, we won, yes. I just have one on a 10 volt, one on a 20, so that is all I need right there. Okay, thank you. Turn the key off. This thing's gonna run when I put it back together. I like it. I like it. Ignore the ripples in the top of this. I have my battery charger on. It's charging the batteries right now. It's just a little noisy in the system. Turn the battery charger off. Make it less noisy. Recording this one more time. I'm going to send this to the potential new owner. And we'll record this one on my phone. And let's change our time base this time. Go just a little bit more. Alright, crank it, hon. Or wait, key on first. 5 volts on both signals. Yeah. Crank it. Okay, alright, shut it off. Did not want it to start there. Thank you. That's a win right there. Alright, she's all back together. Time to start it up. Pretty sure we're ready to go. Let's turn the key on first and do a fuel check, make sure we have no fuel leaks. Our little code reader is gonna help us a lot here too. Let's clear any faults. Okay, let's go back and look. Make sure our hydraulic oil's not leaking. Looks good too. Okay, well, it might not fire up because I had that line's off. It should though, it should fire right up. I don't want to hear any long crank times. Yeah, a little bit of a longer crank because that line was full of air. We'll let this run for a minute. No codes. Yeah. Let's go to a fast idle. It's pretty cool. Turn the cruise on. Hit the set. Puts it at 1,000 RPM. I didn't know that till like a month ago. Actually a few weeks ago that feature was even here. And we'll let this run till my pressures come up. Air pressure I'm talking about. Hear that first blow off and let this idle back down and shut it off and try to restart it again. But I like that. No codes. I went the air. Turn this off, fast idle. And this is going to be key right here. Let me turn this off. It's interfering. Okay, ready? I'll shut down. Let's wait for about 10 seconds or so. And previous to replacing this engine speed sensor, I did them both, but I had one bad one. Really long crank time, sometimes wouldn't start. And I was fooled by it because I had false engine speed sensor codes before when I had a fuel issue years ago. Yeah, that's a win. So I didn't plan on shooting any more videos on the RV, but again, I'm glad this happened to me before the new owner took it. And it just a little divine intervention that happened. I certainly wouldn't want their first trip, you know, breakdown, have these problems with that engine speed sensor fault. And it really took me about 3.5 days, start to finish, really working every day, just researching. I wasn't familiar with the CAPS injection system as much as I needed to be, and I chased my tail again for a while, just believing that engine speed sensor code was false, and it was not. And you know, the repair for that was really a bear. And you know, I often use the term mindless work, and I need to reiterate to you guys who maybe I've offended in the past, you know, calling your type of work mindless, you know, where you're not troubleshooting, you're just nuts and bolts. It was constant problem solving. You know, not the right tool, can't get to this component, what do I do, what's an alternative? And you know, props to all of you techs out there, regardless if you're a diagnostic tech or not. It takes real skill and real problem solving, even to wrench, without all the diagnostic stuff. So thanks for joining me. I'm actually hoping that Tim, I keep saying his name, the new potential owner, I almost hope he says no. I feel like I want to keep it. I'm gonna miss it. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Almost forgot, some of you want to see the engine speed sensors while the engine's running. There it is. I'm not starting another desktop recording. It's no different than the cranking one you saw earlier. These sensors, it's weird. I mean, I'll pause it. They read off of the same trigger wheel. They're right next to each other, and they're just staggered by about 4 teeth. I really don't understand the concept. I don't know why you can't just use one, and why missing one would result in a long crank time, because you know, it's in the same location each time. It's not like it's really a cam sensor and crank sensor. It's, yeah. So one of you guys can share that with me, exactly what they're doing and why, with 2 staggered crank sensors or engine speed sensors right next to each other. My 2 fingers right there next to each other. Same trigger wheel. Weird stuff. But it's fixed. I hate goodbyes. Bye. You've been good. I'm sad. 1 second. Showing the remnants. I won't miss this. My ruined driveway.